All right, let's go. We got the slate coming at you here. DraftKings, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter channels, wherever you're finding us. We appreciate that you do. This show comes your way Monday through Friday, but here on Thursdays, it's the sports edition, which means we can talk whatever we want, whatever you guys have questions about, concerns, comments, whatever you just want to razz us a little bit, get them in, let us know. And obviously, bulk of the time, as is typical here, Reid T. Fowler and I, Adam Kaufman, we spend time on Thursday night football, kicking off a new week in the NFL. We'll get to the main slate on Sunday, maybe a little bit if there's time. We could mix in Tiger Woods, his return to the PGA potentially on the horizon. He's going to play here coming up real soon. And obviously, NBA plays for just a light 3-game slate if anybody wants to go there as well. But Reid, well, first, how are you? How you doing?
Good. I was telling Kaufman when it snows, I get a little angry because I'm from a place. Actually, today on Mauna Kea, so one of the highest peaks in the world, where the Keck Observatory is, it actually snowed up there in Hawaii.
No kidding.
Like a freak blizzard. So
what's a blizzard there though? Like how much snow are we talking about?
I mean, it's nothing. It's like a dusting.
But
like
dusting,
it can get like you can see it from space. So it's enough snow where you can see it from satellite, image from space.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's not like this snow. We didn't get a lot of snow, and I'm still angry. And on top of that, we get to watch the Steelers and the Vikings on Thursday night. Oh, joy.
You know what? People are going to mock this game, and rightfully so, probably. But I'm going to try and find a way to make this game compelling as we sit here and talk about it for the next half hour or so. Well, it starts with this, Reid, really, is the fact that this is, regardless of what you think of these two teams and how they've played this season, and they're both obviously, middling right around 500, but it's a game that means something. I mean, both these teams are mathematically, most teams are, but are mathematically in a playoff hunt. Pittsburgh, a very realistic one. Minnesota is, there are a few teams to try and leapfrog in the process, but as things stand looking at the standings right now, you got the Steelers after a big win, obviously an important one over the Ravens. You've got them at 8th in the AFC. There are 13 teams really that you could say realistically are still vying for a playoff spot. And on the other side, the Vikings, the 2 straight losses have not helped, especially losing on that final drive, final play to the Detroit Lions of all teams on Sunday, giving the Lions their first win of the year and first year and win in like a calendar year. It's been a long time, but they are 9th in the AFC. Basically, though, the entire conference, right down to all these teams that have 5 wins are still, in a realistic postseason mix. So we'll see. But I do think just the fact that this game does mean something. There are a lot of questions going into it in the next few hours before lineups will actually lock for those that are thinking about making lineups, DFS, or decisions based on your season-long lineups, whatever it may be. There are some things that are still coming out. We know obviously Adam Thielen is not going to play. That's a big deal. So who's important, who's, interesting on the Minnesota side. But we also have some relatively breaking news from Adam Schefter, ESPN, just a few minutes ago. Vikings running back DALVIN Cook will play tonight versus the Steelers with a shoulder harness, just as he did against the Saints in January 2020, a wild card game when he had 31 touches for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. So with the harness, expectations are Cook maintains his regular workload. So why don't we begin right there? And once again, Reid, what is an important game tonight? What are your expectations for Cook and this Vikings offense?
Yeah, I mean, my first inkling is why would you push Cook out there? Is Madison that much, and internally, right? This is sort of a rhetorical question. Yeah. Is Madison that much worse from a production standpoint than DALVIN Cook? And I think the answer, based off of what all the expectations and the reports are, is that because Adam Thielen is out, that they need to find production much more than they necessarily would from their 2 best offensive players, which is going to be DALVIN Cook and Justin Jefferson, right? Like that is what you're going to see. Now, normal workload, this is where I would be a little bit worried, is that a normal workload is not 31 attempts in my mind, right? Like that's not going to be it for him. I'd say a normal workload for DALVIN Cook is probably going to be like 85 to 90% of the 85% of the snaps, probably, or 80% of the snaps, or wherever he was, usually working at. But I don't think the attempts are necessarily going to be there. The Steelers have one of the worst adjusted DVOA defenses in the NFL. They're 30th out of 32 teams. They just don't have a very good defense. They provide they put a lot of pressure on the quarterback. But when you look at the QB grades of the QB passing rating for quarterbacks who've been under pressure, Kirk Cousins is one of the best in the NFL right now from a passing rating standpoint, from a PFF grade. He's really good under pressure. So Dalvin Cook, like I think actually it's nice from a showdown perspective of, if you want to take him, I think you're going to get him at lower roster percentage. And because he's in, you're going to get the other guys at lower roster percentage as well, right? Because it's just going to soak up. So I think Dalvin Cook being in is actually really good from a showdown perspective and leverage, especially if you want to go to a guy like Kirk Cousins or someone. I mean, Justin Jefferson's obvious, but I really like Kirk Cousins from that standpoint.
So just building on Cousins, and he's kind of quietly had a good year. I mean, at least by Kirk Cousins standards. As we know, the touchdown to interception ratio is phenomenal, 25-3. The Vikings, for, you know, whatever you may think of that offense, they're both kind of middling, you know, generally unimpressive offenses overall. I know there are guys like Justin Jefferson, who you talked about, who's, you know, been elite. He's second in the NFL in receiving yards this year with more than 1,200 already, with a lot of season left here in just his second NFL campaign. So there are a lot of really good players individually, but Kirk Cousins, when you look around at what he has to work with, and, you know, we'll show you some stats here on our screen as well, and you can see how he's done from a fantasy perspective. You know, last couple, just, I don't know, he's averaging 22, but he generally lives in that, like, you know, mid to high teens to that low to mid 20s window. I mean, he's not a guy that really booms typically, but as you think about, without Adam Thielen and with Dalvin Cook having these questions, is Kirk Cousins appealing when you think, all right, you have Justin Jefferson, but after that, it's all right, what am I going to get out of Ty Conklin? What am I going to get? Is Madison going to be a factor in the run game? Obviously, more so than the passing game. Is KJ Osborne, who I think a lot of people are going to be, you know, jumping to as a pivot play with Thielen out, going to actually be someone who gets 8, 9, 10 targets and is a real factor in this game? How do you view this offense overall?
I think it's an offense that is the only thing that's keeping them in games. I mean, if you take a look at just their game logs, I think 7 games, if I remember correctly, have been either decided by one score or have been decided on the last drive, right? And that's worked for them against the Ravens, or excuse me, against the Lions, when they had like that last second drive to kick a field goal. And that's worked against them, right? That worked against them against the Lions. It worked against them. You know, they lost by 8 points against San Francisco, by 3 against Green Bay, or they won. They beat Green Bay, but they lost by, 3 against Baltimore in week 9. So like, you're seeing this team, this offense actually being the only thing that's keeping them in games. And Thielen's been fantastic, but it really hasn't been him, right? It's been Justin Jefferson since week 10. The guy's averaging 12 targets, 8 catches, 140 plus yards. He's been absolutely amazing from a statistical standpoint. I mean, you just take a look at what he's done. It's been out of this world. 143, 169, 182. That's absurd. That's absurd to have those 3 games in the last 4. And look, Green Bay, say what you will about their defense. Like, it's like, I like, it's still fairly good. And to do that against that secondary, against that defense, is amazing. So I think Kirk Cousins, I got him, one of my favorite prop bets, which I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit, correlates with this offense doing well. And I think Justin Jefferson and whoever's out there, Ty Conklin, I think is going to do well. That's the only thing in my mind that's keeping them in games. The defense is not helping at all. Even though they're getting healthier, they get Patrick Peterson back and the 2 linebackers in Barr and Kendricks. I still think that the Vikings have a really good shot of putting up some good points. And look, maybe they don't even need to put up a ton, but in this matchup, everyone has probably seen the Kirk Cousins in primetime stats on their timeline, right? He's horrible in primetime. And I think that's perfect to get a guy like Kirk Cousins, who we think is going to be the best quarterback in this matchup, and especially with Dalvin Cook being back in.
We can go back to DFS, but you obviously alluded to the DraftKings Sportsbook. Let's talk a little bit about that and what this game is going to look like here. It's a 3.5 point spread right now, with Minnesota, the home team, being favored, basically a pick 'em, obviously, because they're getting those points being at home. The over-under is 44.5, which I think is a really interesting number. We both nailed this last week when we were talking about that game, when we said, who was it? It was the Cowboys, right? That played that game. Yeah. So I said it to you. We agreed. It was, Cowboys are going to cover and the game is going to hit the under. How are we looking at this game in terms of what the lines are right now?
Yeah. The over under in this one is a little bit scary.
It is,
because both of these defenses aren't good. So 44.5, like that's not that high at all. So I do like the over a little bit. I can see why someone would say the under is appealing because Najee Harris is solid, right? Dalvin Cook is back in. I get that, but I'm just a little worried about the Steelers defense. Both defenses, really, frankly, they're both not great. So I do like the over. And from a spread standpoint, Minnesota at 3 was obviously nicer. Look, you're getting even money at -3.5. That is value for Minnesota. I think Minnesota is being drastically underpriced here. I know Adam Thielen is out, but skill players don't really move the lines that much. Running backs don't really move the line that much. Quarterbacks, defensive line, and offensive linemen move the line, and most of those guys are intact in this game, right? So I do think Minnesota at -3.5 is appealing. That hook scares me a little bit, but I'd rather stay on the over in this one, and Minnesota -3 if you can get it. But look, plus 100 at -3.5 is perfectly fine for me.
So I don't know what it is that has me going this way, but and maybe it's partially personnel. Maybe I don't know. I like Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Najee Harris, and all these guys. Who doesn't? Obviously, we know Ben Roethlisberger is washed, and quite frankly, he has been since, as far as I'm concerned, the middle of last year, even when they were still winning games, and he just hasn't really improved since. And I don't know, but even still, I look at this tonight, Reid, and just something. It's like if I'm betting with my gut, I like the Steelers at +3.5. More so, I like Pittsburgh on the money line at +150. I like Pitt to win this game, and it's not like that would be a massive upset or anything like that. Again, we're just talking about a 3.5 point spread. I just feel like Pitt is going to go in and take care of business in this game.
Yeah, I mean, you look, Claypool, FREIERMUTH, Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris. I think sometimes, and this is what people do a lot, is that from a fantasy football standpoint, we look at these individual players and be like, well, individually, even though Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook are great, from a player totality standpoint, the Steelers should win this game, right? Because they have the better players on offense. They do, from a whole.
And the better defense.
And the better defense. But having said that, look, TJ Watt, like he played fantastic against Baltimore after coming back from COVID. Being on, I think, early in the week and then coming back testing negative. And that was huge. 3.5 sacks against Lamar Jackson. That's fantastic, right? But they don't have Joe Hayden. Who's going to guard, right? Who's going to guard Justin Jefferson? And the reason why I bring that up is I think that begs the question of, can Pittsburgh stay with Minnesota if that's the case, right? Do they have the players? Do they have the quarterback to do that? Maybe, right? But when you take it from a value standpoint, you got to lay juice to get with the favorites, right? You're getting points and you're laying a massive amount of juice at -120. So obviously Vegas feels like that number is fairly enticing. They want to probably get you a little bit more towards the Minnesota side because they're giving you plus money. So I get where you're going with that, but I just take a look at how the Steelers currently are made up. And right now, I just don't have any trust in their defense. And if they have to come back, I just don't really think they can. Like, they special teams probably, like, they have maybe the leg up over that. Chris Boswell, I think, is better than Greg Joseph, but like that's probably nominal in the sense of the spread. So I'd rather get it at 3. So I'm with you on that. Like 3.5, I'd probably stay away from backing the Vikings, but I do like them at 3. And at that point, Kauf, right? Like it might be a toss up. It's more of a toss up if this game was like, and we'll get to this, I'm sure, in a little bit, in Tampa Bay and Buffalo. Like that's more of a toss up when the spread is like 3 and the over under is like 52, 53. It's high in the 50s. Then that's when money lines become much more appealing, right? Because you see back and forth, really good offenses, high game total, could be like a lot of variance up there. And the low scoring games, it's like potentially last possession. And I don't know if I trust that too much.
It's really interesting too. I mean, for anyone, I'm sure you know this, but for anyone out there listening, watching that doesn't, these teams, both of them, play tight games all the time.
Yeah,
all the time. I mean, it's been the story of their season. They could just as easily, both of them, have significantly better records than they have. You look at Pittsburgh here, 6-1-1 in games decided by 8 points or less. The Vikings, 4-7. Again, the Vikings are, you know, they've only played a couple more games than that overall. That's all their losses right there. They are 4-7, and those 7 games, Reid, have been decided by a total of 28 points. Right. So I know there are a lot of people out there that are shocked that Mike Zimmer even still has a job after losing to the Lions last week. They thought a change could be coming. It certainly could come before the end of the year, could come in the offseason, but there's been a lot of bad luck on his side and this team side as well. And so, you know, there's a reason that we're spending so much time talking about the 3 or 3.5 and, you know, what the spread is in this game, because this is absolutely a contest that not only would it be unsurprising, you should almost expect that it's going to be decided by 3 points or fewer.
Yeah, and that's why I think that hook is enticing for the Pittsburgh side, right? Is that you're getting that extra half point. If it ends up being a field goal deficit, right? Like you get that, you get that money. Like if you just look at their game logs, I'm talking about the Vikings, back-to-back losses with the Niners and the Lions, but they beat Green Bay and the Chargers back-to-back. They lost to the Cowboys by 4. They lost to the Ravens by 3. Right, like they beat the Carolina Panthers. So what? They just beat out the Lions in that last second field goal, like I talked about. Right, and they beat the Seahawks. They lost to the Cardinals in week 2 by 1, and they lost to the Bengals the very first week by 3. So you're talking about these teams, like the Vikings. Always, it seems like they play good teams well, and they don't play like they play bad teams potentially not so competitively. And if you're in that camp that you're in, that Pittsburgh is not a really good team, then maybe that's the case. I just don't trust Ben. Like I don't trust Ben at all, especially on the road. Even though they're indoors, I just don't trust them.
So for giggles, and in part because obviously it's what we do here, and we'll get back to DFS and this, they tie together obviously as to whether you believe a guy's a good player or not, but prop bets on the DraftKings Sportsbook, and let's look at the wide receivers and running backs. In particular, what I'm showing people on the screen here, if you're just out there listening and not watching, the receiving yard props right now. So you can see all these. You've been studying up on them, watching them move throughout the course of the day as well. There are 2 in particular that I guess if I were to put it this way, I'm most comfortable with. There are 2 I'm most comfortable with. One might even surprise you. In fact, one, I'm looking at it right now. I think they both even potentially moved a little bit just since this show has started. Chase Claypool right here at the top at 50.5. He was 48.5 when I looked at it all about 5 minutes ago. I like that number. I still like that number at 50.5, although I liked it a little bit better at the 48.5. And that's minus 115. And then you mentioned him, Pat Freiermuth, who he gets the targets from Big Ben, independent of whether he catches them or not. It's another story. And obviously what you think of Big Ben, that's all related. But 35.5 for a guy that I just believe is going to get opportunity here in this one. You know, Deontay Johnson, 82.5. It I don't know, makes me a little uneasy. Even Justin Jefferson, who should very easily break 93.5. I don't know. I don't like the number enough that I'm looking to put money on it. But Claypool in the mid 50s and Freiermuth in the low to mid 30s. That line, like I said, has climbed a little bit just during this show alone. I like those 2 in particular. Who jumps out to you?
Yeah, I mean, last week we talked about Juwan Johnson, right? Just getting the over receiving on 1 catch. That's what happened. Then he got hurt. So if you guys tailed that, you liked it because he got it, and then that was it. You didn't have to worry about negative yards. You didn't have to worry about anything. It's because that's all he did. And that's why I think Ray McLeod at minus 115, 13.5. He's running more. He's in more snaps than James Washington is. So he's probably going to be that 3rd wide receiver. You don't need to see James Washington on the board.
No, he's not even listed.
Yeah, so I like those because when you look at receiving props, Kauf, over the last 13, right? So from weeks 1 to last week, 1 through 13, receiving props hitting the over has happened the least in terms of percentage from a totality. All wide receivers and tight ends, all pass catchers, the receiving props hitting the over has only hit 43 or around 44% of the time, and that's the lowest of any major prop category. Having said that, this game I probably hone in on one guy. That's Justin Jefferson. He's the highest, right? At minus 115, you got to pay to get over 93.5. We talked about what he was doing in his stats over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Who else are they going to pass to? Right? Like, I mean, Tyler Conklin, fine. I get it. But who else are the Vikings going to pass to? Like he's going to get like 14 targets, 9 targets,
Osborne,
11.
don't forget about Osborne. He's at 43.5 tonight.
But what I'm thinking is that, like, when you talk about, and similar, like everyone is pumping Osborne up really, really high. And I get that. I get that he's a fine number 3. He's no Adam Thielen, but he's going to be serviceable. This guy already has over 1,200 yards receiving, and we still got 4 games left in the season, right? That's unheard of. And he's on a clip that is probably at his highest. Like, if he's playing at his best, I put him as the best wide receiver in the NFL, along with Tyreek Hill, along with Devontae Adams, along with any of those guys right now. Maybe leave Jacoby Myers off that wide receiver 1 list because he didn't have any catches last week, but or on Monday. But
yeah, but 2 guys did.
Right, exactly.
Mac Jones only threw the ball 3 times.
Right. But I just think 93.5 is still low. I mean,
yeah. I mean, like, look, you may be right. Yeah.
So like that's the only spot that I would go to. If you take, again, the over props, or excuse me, the percent of under wins for receiving yards, obviously by correlation standpoint, right, is the highest. So like under receiving yards of any major prop category hits at the highest clip. You mentioned Pat Freiermuth. The thing that scares me about him is that the Vikings are really, really good at defending tight ends. Harrison Smith, Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr. These guys are made to cover tight ends, right? Like big safeties or hybrid, really fast athletic linebackers. If you look at Minnesota, they've defended the tight ends very well. And Freiermuth hasn't really had, like, he's getting the targets, yeah, but like he's essentially going to have to hit his ceiling over the last 2 games to hit this over prop. That doesn't really leave a lot of leeway, a lot of leverage. Could it happen? Sure. I'd probably rather go like anytime touchdown with Freiermuth if that were the case, right? It's either like him or it's Najee. Those are the 2 guys that really get a lot of work in the red zone.
I'm looking at some projected point totals, ownership ratings, things like that I enjoy obviously talking about with you whenever we get to do these shows, especially looking ahead to the Thursday night games. And let me see here, just pulling up. I want to make sure I've got the latest and greatest information. So obviously, Justin Jefferson, he's the projected top scorer in this game, north of 20 points, right around 22. Dalvin Cook, it still frightens me a little bit. I know, we got the news from Schefter, he's going to play and should have a normal workload and all that, but projected in the vicinity of 19 to 20 points, which, yeah, he could be a slate breaker. He's still Dalvin freaking Cook, but I don't know, projected at higher than Kirk Cousins, Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris, Ben Roethlisberger, Chase Claypool, all of them. The ownership especially, like Cook, Johnson, Cousins, Harris, they're both right there. Certainly Jefferson. They're all projected to be owned in 50+% of lineups, including obviously the captain spot. Your most popular captains, use your heads. It's going to be what you think. It's Jefferson right around 15% as things stand right now. Cook, Johnson, Harris, all right around 10%. But is this a game that you could argue for, just given the way the talent is distributed and the pricing, the way it looks like, could you make an argument to have a cheaper punt play at captain so you can really stack up some of those more expensive guys in your flex?
I mean, who would it be, right? Like, that's obviously the next viable question. The follow-up question is like,
it could be Osborne. It could be, depending on what you think this game is going to be, it could be a kicker.
Right. I'd argue that if I'm going to do that, it'd be one of the receivers on the Pittsburgh side, right? Claypool or Deontay. Like, Deontay is getting like 14 targets a game. It's wild. It's sort of what he was doing last year too.
Yeah, you look at like double figures each of his last 4.
Yeah, his yards per 10 or his yards per catch, whatever, right? It doesn't really matter. He's getting the volume. 8 catches, 9, 7, 7. That's pretty good. So if you wanted to, I don't really think it's going to be that contrarian, like you mentioned, right? Like, he's probably going to be like, I got him at 13 to 15% roster percentage in the captain spot. So it's really not going to be that contrarian. And then you go down to like your boy, Pat Freiermuth, Tyler Conklin, right? He's got to probably get 2 touchdowns if that's the case, right? In the captain spot. Cause I don't really think he's a volume player. He's at 9 something. I think he's at 93 in the captain spot. So to hit value at like, yeah, he's probably got to get you, 93. Like a ton, and he's not really that guy. Like, he's getting 9 targets, 7 receptions, and 56, but no touchdowns since week 10. Look, you got 2 touchdowns though in week 10 on 3 catches, right? 11 yards, 2 touchdowns. That is extremely variant. That's not necessarily going to happen. So you start going down the list, and you're like, okay, well, maybe the Steelers defense against Ben Roethlisberger or against Kirk Cousins primetime, right? Like maybe that could be it. But I don't really trust Steelers defense at all, because like they're not going to get you 5-6 sacks potentially like they did last week, right? I know Cam Hayward is dealing with some stuff too, and from a defensive line, the injury standpoint, that's huge. If he's not 100%, no one probably is 100%. But like you start to go on the list, you're like, God, really? Is there anyone that I can? Yeah, like 7 sacks, right? But look at that, 0, 2, 5, 7. Like,
right.
You need the, like we talked about last week, the defensive touchdown, which we saw from Dallas. You need the 4 picks, the sacks. Like you need all of that to happen. And that means like it's a really rough game for Minnesota at home. I don't see that happening. So I don't think this is a one to actually be contrarian at the captain spot, other than I think Kirk Cousins is your best bet of being contrarian at the captain spot, because Adam Thielen is out, because there's only Justin Jefferson, because Dalvin Cook is in, Alex Madison is like I think that's the play, because we've seen now Kirk Cousins is one of the best quarterbacks, whether people like to believe it or not, this season, either under pressure or in a clean pocket. His passer rating, his almost every statistical category, he ranks out as one of the best QBs in the NFL right now. So if that's the case, right, he's giving you a floor of 18 points. Like if he adds another touchdown, you get that multiplier at the captain spot, that's going to reach that's going to reach you 30 plus points, which is what you need, right? At that 15K price tag, you need that 2.5x in your captain spot. And I think Cousins is the guy that is not going to be rostered heavily and can get you there, because we've seen now 3 touchdown game. Like he's thrown multiple touchdowns since week 8 or 9. It's like he's doing no interceptions either.
Going back, well, actually, let me see.
1 interception.
Since week 9.
Yeah, it's been like he's been solid since week 9. People don't want to believe in Kirk Cousins, and I think the whole narrative of him in primetime, that's what's going to give you the leverage, right? Is that, and if he completely goes, and poops the bed, then you're none the wiser. Like, of course, like Kirk Cousins, but if he doesn't, and you got him at like 8% in the captain spot, that's going to mean a lot.
For anyone joining us late, just to reset a little bit, because it's the most important aspect of this game, at least in terms of going into it and what we should expect, and where you're potentially putting your money from a lineup building construction. Dalvin Cook, again, the expectations are that he's going to play tonight. That being said, and you hit on this off the top, Reid, how comfortable are you with Cook playing tonight in terms of rostering him versus a Madison, versus just fading them both all together and maybe stacking up elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, Dalvin Cook, if you take a look at what these guys have done, right, I think David Montgomery is a prime example, Christian McCaffrey when he was healthy. Like when these guys came back and the team was saying, hey, full workload, they weren't lying, right? Like they weren't lying. Unless you're the Eagles and Boston Scott, you said, oh, the guy's going to get, his usual workload, and he goes out there for 2 snaps. Right, that's Nick Sirianni. That's a rookie coach. That's him playing mind games. It's not going to work all the time. But usually when these guys are back, they usually get a full workload. I'm like you though. I think you have to put him if you're doing multiple lineups. I think it's absolutely,
you have to have some exposure to him.
You have to, right? You have to, just in case the people that are scared are more like that's more the case than people who aren't. Right? Dalvin Cook is someone who can get you to that. Look at his receiving work. It's fantastic. So you have to do that, especially again with Thielen out. When receivers are out, or when prime players, like any key player is out, right, especially for a receiver, most of the time we think, okay, like Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne's going to come back in and he's going to get, let's say he gets 50 to 75% of his production. That's not the case, right? Usually that's not the case. What happens is when these guys go out, the team says, okay, who's the next, like who's our key players, right? Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook, like no specific order. If Thielen is out, we're going to actually feature Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson a lot more than usual, right? We saw it with Keenan Allen or Mike Williams. If they're out, Austin Eckler is going to get a ton of work. Doesn't necessarily mean the Jalen Guytons of the world and the Palmers of the world are just going to step into Keenan Allen's role. That's just not the case. It's going to be, we trust these guys a lot more. We're going to put more workload on them. And that means if that's the case, I think Madison is definitely someone too, right? Like, what if Dalvin Cook gets a little stinger and he's like, you know what? I don't want to push it. Madison's going to be in for a huge workload. So I would definitely have exposure to him. I would be less inclined to play Cook and be more interested in Madison and Cousins than playing Dalvin Cook.
Our man Robbie Noble in the chat and asks who's Koff's captain, which of course, as we know, takes us back to our Madden days and building lineups. But in all seriousness, and I already outlined it, the most popular captains are exactly who you would expect them to be. And Justin Jefferson's going to be captain in most lineups tonight, and understandably so. I don't think it's crazy. It would be bold. So I guess in that sense, it would be crazy, but I don't think it's outright lunacy to say, you know what, indoors, no weather, the variance of this game in terms of spreading the ball around, like what the hell? I'm going to captain a kicker. What the hell? I'm going to look at Greg Joseph. I'm going to captain a kicker. And then I mean, think about it. Like I could afford Jefferson. I could afford, Johnson and Harris. I could, mix a Claypool in there.Maybe you're fading both the quarterbacks or swap one of those out, put both QBs in there if you want to. The point is you can load up in the flex if you do something really kind of, nuts as a big salary saver and do something like that. And I'm not sitting here, 2.5 hours out from lock and committing to doing that, but it's on my mind. I'm thinking about it, Reid.
Why?
Because I think you can get so much. I know you're losing the 1.5 on touchdowns from Jefferson or from Cousins or from Cook or from you name it, but if you're potentially lighting up the flame emojis going down that flex, and you hope that your kicker gives you 10 points and turns it into 15,
yeah,
that's it's.
Are you talking about?
I'm just saying, like, you can build a lineup you can feel good about going into this game, doing something very different, obviously in what would be a GPP strategy.
And you're not captaining the kicker.
No, I'm saying I could justify captaining a kicker.
Oh, okay. Well, send a head-to-head invite my way. And
I will. You know what? I will.
And put that kicker in the captain spot.
I will. I'll do that. And I'll feel good about it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if that's the case, then yeah, you're really taking the being contrarian to the utmost extreme. You're galaxy braining the what out of
I
this.
am. Yeah, I am.
Which is fine. I'd be more inclined to captain defense over a kicker, just because you get that extra, like if they return a touchdown, right?
Sure.
Kicker, there's only one way a kicker can score points. One way. Yeah. That's it. Receivers, DSTs, running backs, quarterbacks, they can score multiple ways. That's the only issue with captaining a kicker. So unless this is like a kicker league.
True. I am wondering, we'll get to some main slate and some other stuff before we get out of here in the next 10 minutes or so. But I'm wondering, we've been spending so much time talking about Cook versus Madison. By the way, if Cook is what we are told he's going to, never mind expectations. If he's told, if he's what we're told he's going to be tonight, like unless you're just skeptical and looking for an expensive, by the way, punt play, like Alexander Madison is not a guy that I'm going anywhere near tonight. For what his price tag. I mean, look at this. He's coming in at $9,800 because obviously he was not expected to be a backup tonight. And unless people are playing games with us, as you alluded to before, and Madison becomes the guy, that's way too pricey a risk for my blood. So I expect Madison to have very low ownership tonight. But I'm wondering, again, coach speak and stuff like that. On the other side for Pittsburgh, Najee Harris is Najee Harris. We know he's what he's capable of. He's going to be highly rostered tonight. He should be. But would you be willing, just based on some of the whispers coming out of Pittsburgh right now, that they want to start to limit his workload a little bit, save him up, make sure he's as fresh as possible for a postseason run, even though they're not technically even a playoff team right now? How do you feel about a flyer on someone like Benny Snell?
Zero interest.
Zero. All right. I just look. I want to respond to the press clippings that are out there.
Yeah, no, like I appreciate that the journalistic integrity of responding to a press clipping.
Yes.
But Benny Snell, right there,
$1,000. Yeah, $1,000. Giving you nothing a week.
No, nothing a week. He's slow. He's not going to be a factor at all. Like. This is what like every year we have to deal with this, right? The coach talk, the player talk, especially from the coaches about all the BS around their injuries and this and that. Don't believe a single, unless it's like Sean McVay, right? Who's actually been pretty like honest with like his players and where they are. Don't believe a single word coaches say at all, because when the rubber hits the road and they need to win a game, especially if you're the Steelers, right? They're not going anywhere anytime fast, but they're still technically in it, right? They have to win out, I believe, to win their division, which is not going to happen. You're not going to limit Najee Harris's touches, especially running backs of any other position, right? The what you do is you get these guys on lower salaries, right? Because this running backs don't have a high salary cap hit, like they just don't, like quarterbacks, and you run them in for 4 years. That's it. You run them, and you run them for 4 years. You can find really good running back, like an Elijah Mitchell. You can find really good running backs not in the first round. So you use this guy as much as possible, as much as possible. And he's in line for a pretty big game if he's used that way in this matchup. Like the Vikings, they're like bottom third in rush DVOA right now, right? DVOA is like it's like a weighted stat, right? It's the strength of schedule, strength of defense, players, and it measures from a weighted standpoint how good the defense is and like scenarios, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, give yourself a popsicle headache.
Right, exactly. But just think of it, it's a holistic stat, right? It's more weighted as opposed to just the yardages and that stuff. They're one of the worst from a rush standpoint. The Vikings are. He's averaging 3.6 yards a carry, which is not great, but the guy gets a ton of work in the pass game. Like, I would be much more inclined to play Madison in this game over Benny Snell. Even at the price tag, which I think is, I get it. But again, that means that you're going to get like single digit roster percentage on Alexander Madison in every category because of what the Dalvin Cook news. What if Dalvin Cook isn't truly 100%? He gets a stinger. He gets hit the wrong way. We've seen Dalvin Cook every year get banged up every year. Like I had him last year in season long and I ended here. And every single carry, I was holding my breath that he was going to get hurt. And eventually he did. And eventually he got hurt again a couple of times this year. The guy is just built a little bit more fragile than other running backs. I'd be much more inclined to play Madison over Snell.
By the way, congrats on making the playoffs in our Madden Broadcaster League. I just wanted to put that out there for the public.
Yeah, and I think I deserve just a medal for this because, and I was telling Kauf this, and I know everyone cares about my fantasy team, and I know Kauf
everyone
likes to say
look, that. Anyone that's watching this does care about your fantasy team.
My top 7 picks had not played a single game together.
It's unbelievable.
And then just take that in. My top 7 picks have not played a single game together from start to finish throughout the entire year.
It's good reaction to the waiver wire and free agency, my man. It's good general managing on your part.
I gotta think I'm playing Jeff tonight in our first round, Jeff Ulrich, and he and I always argue back and forth about Kirk Cousins. I think he's a good quarterback. Obviously, Jeff doesn't, and I have to choose between Kirk Cousins and Kyler. And part of me just wants to put in Cousins. Part of me wants to put in Cousins just to prove that I can beat Jeff without Kyler Murray with Kirk Cousins, but I probably won't because I'm a coward.
Yeah, well, and Kyler went for 30+ points last week, so probably I played Derek Carr over him. Somehow, some way, still won that matchup in an alternative league. Just got thank you for the weather in Buffalo. That's all I'll say. So one more thing about I just want to make note looking at the DraftKings Sportsbook, and I know people are seeing it. So you've got Dalvin Cook 63.5 as the rush yards tonight. You'll notice Alexander Madison is not even listed. Interestingly, Dalvin Cook is not listed in receiving yards. And you noted it before. Like, this is a guy who'll get you 5, 6, 7 targets a game in the air. He is not even listed for catches and yards at this moment, or a rushing and receiving yard combo or anything like that. It's just Najee Harris that's listed there at 105.5. So something to just keep an eye on. Maybe he shows up before game time, but in the interest of time, because we only have a few minutes left, let's take a look at the main slate coming up on Sunday here and see which games obviously jump out at you. Yeah, please.
It's like the last bet that I like the one that I think that I like fairly a lot, actually, is the over 22.5 completions for Kirk Cousins. That's at -130. I think it was at 21.5 earlier today. So maybe it's going up, but -130. I think that's a good one. Kirk Cousins over 22.5 completions in the TD prop, or excuse me, a QB prop. Yeah. Go down there. Yeah,
22.5. Yep.
Yeah.
-130.
I like that. I like that quite a bit.
22.5 for Roethlisberger on the other side, which I do not like even a little bit.
Nope.
I would go under that one. All right, let's go back to the main slate here for just the couple minutes that we've got. Obviously, we spend a lot of time, as we typically do on Thursday Night Football. But Sunday, you've got a lot of close projected games. Not the case with the Jaguars and Titans. 8.5 is the spread in that one. Chiefs Raiders 9.5, 8.5 Seahawks Texans, 10 Giants and Chargers. Same story, Lions and Broncos. The game though that you said earlier that you really wanted to touch on a little bit, obviously that Buccaneers game that's on the way. So I can pull up some numbers on that, but what are your thoughts on it against the Bills here? 3.5 is the line on that one.
Yeah, I think like this game against the Patriots and the Bills doesn't really move the needle for me at all. Right. For the Pats or against the Bills. Right. Because
just
we didn't really
the weather.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't really see. I mean, look, the Bills held the Patriots to 14 points. You hold any NFL team to 14 points. That's a good outing from a defensive standpoint. And the Bills had chances right in the red zone.
Sure, absolutely.
Look, Bill Belichick, game scripted the heck out of that game, and he did extremely well and did what he had to do to win that game. But at the same time, you take a look at this line, Buffalo getting 3.5 points. I actually think the money line at plus 145 is appealing. I think the Buffalo Bills, and this is what we talked about, 53.5 over under, right? It's a huge point total. Both of these offenses have extremely explosive playmakers on their team that you could see Godwin, Evans, you could see these guys in Gronk score at an impressive clip. Same thing with Diggs, same thing with the guys over on Buffalo. I just think that this one is a little bit, we're taking the Bills right now at a very low point, right? Most of the sentiment on the Bills is at a low point, and the sentiment on the Buccaneers is at a high. But we've seen now the Bucs defense give up 31 against the Colts. They've been a little suspect, and they're extremely aggressive on defense. So I could see a lot of these plays, these 50-50 plays, these jump balls going the Bills' way. And on top of that, and this is where I'll leave it, Jamel Dean, their best defender in the secondary for the Buccaneers, he's probably not going to be playing in this game. So who's going to be guarding a guy like Stephon Diggs? I really like the Bills. Get the points at plus 3.5 if you want to lay them minus 120. But if this goes down to 3, I don't think there's any value at 3. I think the money line is there at plus 145.
I'd just like to see Tom Brady do his old Patriots a favor, obviously, and knock down those Bills another peg. But what's certainly interesting here, a word I feel like I've been using a lot during this show. We were talking about the Bucs. You mentioned the Pats earlier. Futures odds entering week 14 here with some of what has gone on of late. So overall Super Bowl favorites, Bucs, the defending champs, understandably, are still in front, plus 550. Then you got the Chiefs, who are actually, at least last I looked here, I'll double check. They are
talking about their to win the Super Bowl.
So I'm going to go back to that. I was just looking at, all right, so that's NFC.
Chiefs are plus 650.
Did they take AFC off the board for, let's say AFC's off the board at the moment for conference winners, but overall you get the Chiefs.
I have the AFC conference.
Oh, do you have it?
Yeah, Pats are at plus 300. Chiefs are at plus 300. Bills at plus 500.
Perfect.
Ravens at plus 700.
So you've got, Chiefs, Pats, co-favorites, obviously, to come out of the AFC, but overall Super Bowl odds, again, the Bucs plus 550, Chiefs plus 650, Pats with their 7-game winning streak plus 700, Cardinals, same thing, Packers plus 750, and then, of course, the Bills just to round out a top 6 because we were talking about them before, plus 1,100. How are you feeling right now with a handful of weeks not even left in the NFL season?
Well, the AFC is complete, question mark. Who's going to come out of the AFC? And again, the Patriots, I want to see them in a game that is and the Bills one was substantial, but the way the weather was such a variable and an outlier that we can't really value these teams or take a look at them really under a microscope and say this is what the Patriots are going to be in their next couple of games. Bills right at home, and the Colts as well. These are going to be tough games in Indy for the Patriots. If they come out and they win one of two, then they're sitting pretty, right? Because they have a tiebreaker, whether it be with the Bills. So I do like that from an NFC standpoint. It's hard to not think that the Packers have a really good in line to do well in this one. But I love Arizona. I love how their defense is playing. I love that offense. I love that Kyler's healthy right now. So from an NFC standpoint, I think the Cardinals are there at plus 700. They're probably my favorite team. But if I'm looking at the futures right now, the Colts at plus 3,500, like they have a team right now that has a good defense, that has a really good offensive line, and one of the best running backs, if not the best running back right now in the NFL.
Sure. Yeah, MVP candidate.
Right. So when you have that, right, and Carson Wentz is playing mistake-free football, that is a pretty good recipe for the playoffs. Now, who they would have to play, right? They probably have to go to the Bills or the Chiefs in the first round. They probably go, if the Pats get that first round bye, like it's a pretty tough test, right, for the Colts. Is that like they would have to do that? If for some reason, some of these teams like the Bills, something happens to Diggs or to Allen or any one of these guys, I think the Colts at plus 3,500 is a team that I'm taking a look at, and even the Chargers too. Like you want to get some of these teams that are like on the low right now that could.
Yeah, you want to get value while you can.
Yeah, and some of these top teams, fine, right? It's kind of a hot, like the margins are so thin with the Patriots, the Cardinals, the Chiefs. Like you're not really getting a lot of value. The Chargers and the Colts especially is a team that I'm interested in. If I'm putting a Super Bowl future right now for someone who can make it there because of the way their composition of the team, excuse me, and that the fact that they have the recipe for a playoff team, right? Which is a running back, strong defense, strong offensive line, and a good coach.
Yeah, if you want to get value on the Pats, folks, the time as as a staunch, obnoxious Pats fan was to do it when the team was 1-3 or 2-4, not right now on the heels of 7 straight wins, where they're just like the favorites to do everything, reach the Super Bowl, Belichick Coach of the Year, Mac Jones Offensive Rookie of the Year, all that.
What was it, 3 weeks ago when we did this, or a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah,
where they were.
We were talking about it then.
Maybe. Like that was where you would need to do it, right, at 25, just for line value. Yeah. Like right now, there's nothing, right, at plus 700. I wouldn't even touch that.
All right, it's time for us to go. Surprisingly, our producer Eamon's not kicking us out the door as we hit 6 o'clock. He must really be enjoying the show. All right, it's time for us to leave, though. Like I said, Daniel, our producer, our technical director, we thank both of them. Daniel apparently is in first in their producer league as well. So good on him. Hopefully he can close that out strong. But we appreciate everybody hanging out here with us, getting your questions, all that good stuff. And, doing this once a week with Reid. Now our head-to-head beckons for tonight for this Pittsburgh and Minnesota game. Looking forward to that as well. We'll talk to you again. I'll be back with you tomorrow for the slate, and who knows what we'll talk about or who I'm working with, because that's a tomorrow problem. So enjoy the game tonight. And Reid, pleasure, my friend.
Captain that kicker.
I'm gonna.
There we go.
See ya.
All right.